If you want to read The Punisher but you're just not sure where to start, then this is a video for you. Woof woof! Hey guys, it's me Marcus, aka the Mad Dog, and we're back with another video. Now the first book that I'm going to recommend was actually the first that I read for this character because it's Punisher Born, and it's pretty much seen like a prologue to the Punisher Max run, which was written by Garth Ennis, and spoiler alert, the majority of this list is actually written by Garth Ennis. But you get to see Frank Castle before he becomes the Punisher, and you see him through the eyes of somebody that worked alongside him in the army. So it's set during Vietnam, and you get to see this great inner monologue of this character who's just trying to understand who Frank Castle is, and there's all these little hints that Frank Castle maybe isn't all put together before he even went back home and his family were killed. Spoiler alert if you didn't know the origin of the Punisher. But this is a really interesting 4-issue miniseries that has art from Derek Robertson, so you've also got the same creative team that worked together on The Boys. And it might be the case that you've already got the opinion that the Punisher's just somebody that goes out and kills and that's pretty much all there is to his stories. Then I'd recommend this as just a short little reset so that you can then get into some of those later runs. But since I've already said his name, I might as well recommend the next book on the list, which is Punisher Max by Garth Ennis. This is pretty much the quintessential Punisher title if it is that you don't want those wider connections to the Marvel Universe. Max was an imprint that was built for people who didn't want to be bogged down with any kind of continuity or didn't want to have to read 4 other series to understand what was happening. It's why I recommended other series like Alias when I did my Where to Start Marvel Comics. But this run is just so good and it's quintessential Punisher storytelling. Throughout this run there was some great stuff with the Irish Mafia, the Russians, and pretty much near enough every type of gang that existed in New York. Like when I was reading this in the complete collections, it was just a really great time. So this is a much longer run, it went on for a good number of years and somebody even took over it when Garth Ennis left. But the beauty of this run is that you can just go by the individual story arcs and just stop when you want to. So even though a lot of people hold this in high regard, you don't have to worry if you're a new reader and you want to just jump into Punisher Max. Next up, and sticking with the Max line, in case it is that you like the sound of a Punisher title that isn't really set in continuity, but you don't really want something that's 60 issues long. In which case you can go with one of my personal favourite runs by Jason Aaron. Yes, the writer that is currently taking over the Punisher once again, even though it has got that god-awful logo, and I understand the politics behind that, but I personally, yeah, I'm going to get into a little mid-video rant. I think instead of retiring the original Punisher logo because of a few people that had to ruin it for everybody, why not make a story where the Punisher goes after those people? I don't know, that makes more sense to me, but in the slim chance that Marvel's watching, I will gladly write that story for you. But yes, Jason Aaron's original take on the character was phenomenal. I loved this and it was exactly everything that I wanted because it's the Punisher going up against the Kingpin. I also think this has one of the best representations of Wilson Fisk, and there's other characters that do exist in the Marvel Universe that crop up throughout this, but not in the way that you're used to seeing them in the 616 universe. This is only about 20 or so issues long. I really hope that they reprint this omnibus so some of you guys can get it. And I sped through this the first time that I read it because even though it's got sort of smaller story arcs, it does just feel like one complete story. And with a character like the Punisher, especially because of the fact that he will kill his villains near enough as soon as he sees them, it is difficult to have that continuing arc going over, but Jason Aaron managed to do it. Definitely recommend this one if you can get your hands on it, and I think I am due a reread of it soon. But maybe you want the exact opposite of that concept. Maybe you know about the Marvel Universe and you want to just pick up the Punisher, in which case I would definitely recommend his Civil War tie-in that was written by Matt Fraction that then continued into Punisher War Journal. I was so disappointed a few years ago when they printed the first volume of a complete collection of this series and then just decided to not continue with it. This is a very underrated run, which seems to be the theme with Matt Fraction titles that were coming out from Marvel during that time. Yep, I'm still talking about the Invincible Iron Man, but especially the Civil War part of this run, which was my introduction into Matt Fraction. I really like this. Yes, it is pretty much textbook Punisher because of the fact that it's just him going out and finding people that need to be killed, but because you've got the backdrop of the entire Marvel Universe going up against each other because they don't know whether they should be registered or not, it's just great because Frank Castle is pretty much the last guy who would ever sign the Superhero Registration Act. But it then continues with this run that's still equally as enjoyable, and at that point you will be able to understand the Punisher a little bit better because you've had the backdrop of Civil War. I do hope Marvel rethinks things and they decide to print this book again. I'd love to read the conclusion of this run, but I do think that this is the Punisher series that would be great for people who are already aware of the Marvel Universe. But if you wanted a Punisher run that is also integrated with other Marvel heroes but doesn't take place primarily in someone else's title, I would recommend Punisher by Greg Rucka. This is a very underrated series that a lot of people seem to have forgotten about, but I remember absolutely loving this when I picked it up in single issues. Greg Rucka is one of those creators that understands every intricacy of the character that he's writing, and this series in particular was great because it had a crossover with the Punisher, Daredevil and Spider-Man, but at the same time it is still great for new readers because of the fact that you're following the Punisher on yet another mission to kill someone. But why I think Greg Rucka's run is great is because of the fact that it feels like it's evolved with modern times. So this isn't just about enjoying watching Frank Castle going about and killing people, but instead it's about the ramifications of what happens when he does kill someone. So throughout his journey he's encountered by situations or people who have been affected directly by him, or maybe even some of the people that he's killed since then. And I give this respect because even though it had its own little mini crossover within it, it didn't get bogged down by any of the events that were happening at the time. So if you want to punish a title that isn't set apart from the main Marvel universe, but you still want it to be focused on Frank Castle, then I think that this would be the best bet for you. Maybe it's the case so that that doesn't even appeal to you and you want something that is set in the main Marvel universe but takes into consideration all of the events that are happening at the same time. And if for some reason the Matt Fraction run didn't interest you, then I would recommend Punisher by Rick Remender. Now yes, Rick Remender is known more now for his Image Comics works, but when he was at Marvel, he did some good things. In particular, I love Rick Remender's first story arc where he's just thrown feet first into it all because it's a Dark Reign crossover where he's trying to assassinate Norman Osborn. This almost feels like it's the Punisher going back to his glory days. If it is that it sounded like the Greg Rucka run might be a little bit too serious for you. This did then eventually become Frankencastle because of a crossover with another person in the Marvel universe, and it's just got this wacky, goofy sci-fi tone to it that a lot of people might not enjoy if you do want a pure Punisher story. But if you want something a bit abstract and you don't want to just jump into all the doom and gloom of him going against mafias, then Punisher by Rick Remender might scratch the itch that you've got at the moment. But it's a shame because this is another omnibus that isn't currently available, but I know that Marvel is doing a lot of reprints and they're also bringing out a lot of new content, and if you're looking to pick up any of them, I'd recommend our channel sponsor, Organic Price Books. They've got great packaging, fast shipping and amazing customer services, and if you want Frank Castle to shoot $2 off your order, then make sure that you use code WOOFWOOF at the checkout. And just a little secret between you and me, you can use that code as many times as you like. I've been doing Where to Start now for nearly 2 years, and when I've been recommending characters in the past, I've tried to stay away from the original stories because I just don't really think it's a great jumping on point for a new reader to read something that might be 60 years old. But the Punisher isn't that old of a character and he had his origins as a Spider-Man villain. That's why I'd recommend some of his earlier miniseries. I think all of them are still quite enjoyable and accessible for a new reader. And I know for a modern first-time reader, we often just want something that is quite recent, but there's still a lot of hidden gems in the early years of the Punisher's run. Speaking of which, the next title that I'd recommend is Punisher Warzone. I only started reading this title in the last year because I was doing research for my Jim Lee top 5 notable works, but I think this was the first time where they really found their feet with this character. And even though this could feel dated for a modern reader, I still think it's worth giving a go. It's got some crossovers and story arcs, but it's not built in the same way that a series would be done now. And you might want that. You might want a long run that you can dip in and out of as and when you please. And it's got a great run of artists throughout, and the issues that I've read of this, I did really enjoy, so I'd recommend it to you. Now, I'm not here to just recommend comics because I understand that the other type of media that we've got are great ways to get introduced to a character. I don't feel like you should ever feel ashamed for learning about a character through a different way other than comics, and I would definitely recommend Netflix's season 2 of The Punisher. Now yes, you might be wondering why aren't I recommending season 1, but I personally just didn't rate it that much. Whereas Punisher season 2, I feel like they used the 13 episodes better. All you have to do is watch the trailer because this is one of my favourite trailers for any comic book property. But yeah, unfortunately the Batman did beat it. But Punisher season 2 kind of feels a little bit set apart from the rest of the Netflix Marvel universe. There's a lot of heart, there's some great action, and the Punisher is still very much the Punisher in this. Where other characters might try to decide how they can go around an enemy, Frank Castle's just going to shoot them. And yes, I know some people don't like the Netflix Punisher because he isn't as sadistic as he is in the comics, but his core values pretty much stay the same, so I would definitely recommend checking this out if you haven't seen it. Another curveball, and this might be a spoiler if you haven't read some Donny Cates stuff, but I'm going to recommend Cosmic Ghost Rider. Yep, this might not seem like the best entry route for a Punisher fan, but people get into comics in different ways. And this is a more modern run, and it is set outside of the main Earthbound continuity of Marvel. It delves into that cosmic side, and that might be something that you enjoy. It's almost like the polar opposite of Punisher Max, but at the same time, it's very enjoyable. And it's just got this goofy sci-fi twist to it that I think a lot of people would get a kick out of. And at the end of the day, the main character is still Frank Castle, and that's who I'm recommending today. And as well, I've already done a video where I talk about the Cosmic Ghost Rider omnibus, the contents that are in it, and if you're going to be double dipping. So feel free to check that out if you're confused. But the last non-Garth Ennis recommendation that I've got, I'm going with the Savage Avengers. I'm a little bit disappointed that more people aren't jumping onto this title because I only got these single issues because of Job Lot of Comics. And I sat down and read it because of the fact that I saw that Conan was on the cover of the second issue. And I really enjoy this. And the thing is that the Punisher's one of those characters that it's difficult to recommend a team-based book. Sure, he's been involved in a few in the past alongside characters like Ghost Rider, but I think this is the best, most recent run that you can get that features the Punisher where he's a character within a team. You've just got a great range of characters in this. You've got Wolverine, you've got Elektra, you've got Venom, and you've even got Conan the Barbarian. And if it is that you don't want to jump into something that's Frank Castle centric, then I think that this would be the way to go. Now we're in my final couple of picks, and first up we've got The Punisher Kills the Marvel Universe. If you want a recommendation that isn't going to take up a large amount of your time, you want it to just be quick, easy and done with, then this is definitely the title that I'd recommend for you. I fortunately got it as part of this Marvel Knights omnibus, and it was one of the highlights of this run. I think I said that I was going to do a separate video on it, and I've still got that planned. Just hasn't happened yet. But this is one of those comics that does exactly what it says in the title. It is the Punisher killing the Marvel Universe. Yes, it pretty much is a what if book. I think I even included it in my top 10 crazy what if titles. But at the same time, you do get to see how Frank Castle operates and how he would take on teams like the X-Men, the Avengers and the Fantastic Four. And I just think it's silly, dumb fun. So if you don't want a really dark and gritty Punisher book, even though there are some gruesome kills, this would be the one for you. And yes, of course, it was written by Garth Ennis, who also wrote the Marvel Knights run. I did a review of this early last year and it was one of my favourite books of 2021. There's just so much energy and pace, and there's so many great story arcs. Even though I do feel like it was much better at the beginning of the book rather than at the end, it's still enjoyable for all 40 or so issues that were in it. You've also got the entire saga with the Russian, and he's also on this weird tropical island where there's some kind of atom bomb, and it's just impressive because of the fact that the Punisher wasn't really a well-liked character before this. He had this weird mystical turn which fortunately didn't last for long, but Garth Ennis managed to redefine the Punisher's reputation. The majority of the art's also done by Steve Dillon, so you've got the same creative team as Preacher, and this was just a phenomenal book. It was really quick, easy reading, and it's got that perfect balance between having a serious Punisher book, but also having a lot of fun with the stories that it's telling. And that's why my last recommendation is going to be the first story arc in this book, which is Welcome Back Frank. This is the most important Punisher book that's probably ever existed, because of the fact that everything rested on this. If he had a second bad series in a row, people weren't going to continue reading the character, so Garth Ennis gave us one of the greatest Punisher stories of all time. It's about 12 issues long, so it's not too long and it's not too short, and it's just about Frank Castle going against the Mafia. You've got Marganucci at the top of the hierarchy, and Frank's going to do everything that he must do to get to her, even if that includes punching a polar bear. I absolutely love this storyline. I think it's one of the best that you could read if you've never looked at the Punisher before, and out of all the books on this list that I've recommended, I think this and Jason Aaron's run would probably be top of the list. But that's the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you could do me a massive favour, share this video where you can. That does massively help this channel to avoid dying, but I guess that's the video, and until next time, just make sure that you stay safe and stay mad, all you dogs. Woof woof! See you at the next video.